Philippa, and let me just ask, looking at a second Obama term, what is your judgment about the capacity of the United States, the capacity of the President, the powers of the President to try and resolve some of the institutional, economic and debt problems America faces?
I think it's highly unlikely that President Obama is going to be able to effectively address those issues, which is not exclusively his fault. That's a function of both sides refusing to negotiate. I think that the markets were right to sell down the stock market in the aftermath of the election because they had been too optimistic that somehow an Obama win would equal resolution of the debt problem. And in fact, what we have is something kind of like a Thelma and Louise moment where both Republicans and Democrats are daring the other one to go over the edge. And in fact, just today, Senator Reid announced that he's going to try to remove the so-called filibuster capability. In other words, to deny the Republicans the ability to stop or to impede progress on any issue in politics, which is going to make things extremely difficult. So personally, I think what will end up happening is the stock market will eventually realize how bad it is, that the president does not have the capacity to resolve the issue, and that we are going to go right up to the edge, if not over the fiscal cliff. We will have to shut the US government down for several weeks, maybe more than once, and that actually this needs to be priced in. It's not priced in, and Congress won't respond until the stock market forces them to. So I don't see the president really being able to override all that.
Well, that's a pretty pessimistic analysis that you've just given us. What it suggests is that the polarisation and the divisions in the United States political system, if anything, will just get worse. So extrapolating from that, what does that mean? Does this mean that you're a pessimist about America's prospects as we look out to the medium term, or not? And if you're not, what is the offsetting argument?
Well, I have to say, no, I'm extremely optimistic and have been about the United States. But having grown up in politics, my father served 4 presidents and I've served 2 presidents. When Washington gets itself into an impasse, it's not necessarily such a bad thing, right? The rest of the country can progress without Washington getting in its way. That's one way to think about politics as well. But bottom line is, the US is actually doing remarkably well. I mentioned in my talk earlier today about manufacturing returning from China. Just to put a little granularity on that, to give people a sense of how deep this is. Companies as diverse as General Electric, Otis Elevators, Caterpillar Farmland Equipment, Brooks Brothers, the suit manufacturer, I mean, even Whammo, that makes frisbees and hula hoops, have moved the production back to the United States. You know, ATM machines are being built in the United States again. It is broad and it is deep, and it is not going to be affected by whether Washington can sort out the debt issue or not. The United States is competitive again in a way it has not been for many years. But we also have a boom going on in agriculture, in energy extraction, and in mining. So overall, I'm very upbeat about what will happen in the US, but the innovation that's occurring isn't so widely recognized yet. And we're going to get innovation in politics as well. What we're seeing at the local level for governments is defaults, restructuring of the debt. It's just people want a top-down announcement. They want the president to announce they're going to fix the debt problem, when in fact what you're seeing is a grassroots, bottom-up kind of phenomena. So there isn't any one announcement. At the local level, people are addressing the outstanding issues.
Well, let me just ask you a further follow-up question before I go to other panel members. We've just had in this country an Asian century white paper. That is, the premise is that the coming century is an Asian century, and the focus has been very much on China. If you were the principal advisor to the Australian Prime Minister and able to go and seek advice on the future, would you travel to China, or would you travel to the United States, and why?
Well, call me biased, but I would be traveling to the United States.
Why is that?
But let me be clear. I've had this view now for several years that Australia has linked its future too exclusively to China. I'm not saying that China isn't part of Australia's future. I'm just saying it's not the only future for Australia, and that in fact having a diversified customer base is a smarter way to go, no matter what assets or services this economy is producing. And the fact is that we look at China today and what we see is a very troubled environment. I mean, one issue that didn't come up today I thought was interesting is, I don't know how much you guys have followed these events in Wuhan in China, where they've had the first spontaneous democratic elections in China since the communists came to power, which is a reflection of a grassroots response to the fact that the economy is not able to deliver a better future. And people are actually turfing out local officials and electing their own. So, you know, will the Chinese address this over time? Yes, absolutely. But I can see in the next decade, I would bet a lot more money that the US will figure out how to make profits and generate GDP faster then China will be able to sort out how to shift from an export-led economy to a domestic demand-led economy. That is a more than 10-year process. So I'm not writing off China. I'm just saying a balanced approach makes a lot more sense to me.